Climate activists threaten summer arts festivals, Pope Francis is accused of homophobia, and Donald Trump makes history, but not for the reasons he'd hoped. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This is a show where we take a look at culture, current affairs and politics. And of course, we'll have the latest from all those lovable culture warriors as they plot a busy summer trying to cancel just about everything. Speaking of which, coming up on the show tonight, two major arts festivals have decided they can no longer accept sponsorship from an investment management firm because they're being targeted by activists. Author Tiffany Jenkins will be here to discuss that. As you may have heard, Donald Trump has become the first president to be found guilty of criminal offences. We'll have a Republican and a Democrat here to debate it. And Bryn Harris from the Free Speech Union will also be here to discuss whether the University of Cambridge's planned freedom of speech code will ensure that academics can present controversial opinions and topics. And of course, myself and my fantastic panel will be answering questions from our wonderful studio audience. My comedian guests this evening are Cressida Wetton and Leo Kearse. Welcome both. You had a good week?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lovely day outside. You're wearing a very summery outfit, aren't you?
Getting into ironing this week.
I'm sorry?
Something to do with it. Yeah, summer dresses need to be ironed. I live in a flat now. I've got electricity.
You're sounding like a trad wife. That's
No, not at all.
You're into ironing, aren't you, Leo? You like that sort of...
Sometimes I iron if I'm going on TV.
Yeah.
So,
not today, though.
Just this bit of the shirt. Not today.
Well, look, we've got this audience here, so let's get some questions. Our first question is from Manab. Manab?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My question is a bit topical. Do you think the Labour Party is trying to suppress its more left-leaning members using the House of Lords?
Interesting. Manab, topical is good. Don't worry about that. That's what we're all about. And I presume you're talking about this this Times report where it was suggested that Labour MPs like Diane Abbott have been offered peerages to stand down to make way for Starmer's preferred candidates. There's always been a bit of a conflict within the Labour Party, between the left and the right of the party, so this wouldn't be any different, would it?
Yeah, any broad church party like the Tories or Labour is going to have lots of different factions vying for power. And you know, up until a couple of years ago, it was Momentum that was running the show. And then obviously they did terribly because it turns out that Britain doesn't want to descend into a sort of Venezuelan-style socialist nightmare immediately. We want to stretch it out over at least 10 years. So we're going to elect Keir Starmer instead. But yeah, I mean, whenever parties take power, you know, whoever's in charge, like Tony Blair in '97, he put his cronies into safe seats and tried to, you know, farm people out. And I think Starmer wanted to try and, you know, farm Diane Abbott out to somewhere, maybe get her into a consultancy or an accountancy firm, but that probably wasn't going to work. Well, so yeah, the House of Lords, you know, that's where you can. That's a big holding pen for her.
I should say, because Diane Abbott did tweet earlier, and we've got the tweet here. It says, "This is factually incorrect. I've never been offered a seat in the Lords and would not accept one if offered. I'm the adopted Labour candidate for Hackney North and Stoke Newington. I intend to run and to win as Labour's candidates." It's always been the case, though, hasn't it, that peerages have become like bargaining chips and they've been used by many... I'm not saying that's happened this time,
that's not
but throughout history that's really been...
I think this is like the Russians taking the naughtiest prisoners and putting them out to fight the wars, you know, because this is Starmer's way of getting people in there who might abolish the House of Lords in the long term.
Yeah, but it's interesting because when Claire Fox became Baroness Claire Fox of Buckley, and she's been very outspoken and said the laws ought to be abolished, but of course, she's used it brilliantly because she's been there...
I don't want her leaving.
No, she's the one you don't want leaving.
More of Claire Fox, please.
Because she makes all the right points from within. So actually, there's something to be said for that, isn't there?
Yeah, and also, I mean, people talk about reforming the Lords, but it's one of those things like the monarchy, which shouldn't work and is unfair. It's not elected or anything, but for some reason, it works better than if we elected the Lords.
Well, Claire Fox isn't trying to impress us for the next election.
Yeah.
No, there is that. OK, well, let's get another question now. This one comes from Anton. Hello.
Do you think Ed Davis is doing a good campaign?
Ed Davey. Well, I mean, I don't want to comment too much on particular people's election campaigns, but what I should say is that Ed Davey did launch the Liberal Democrats campaign with some interesting photo shots. Maybe I wonder if we can have a look at these. He was seen paddleboarding, he was seen cycling and flying down water slides. Very active, very Centre Parks. There he goes. There he goes. Look at him there. And have we got any other shot of Ed Davey? I mean, he's enjoying himself. That's the important thing. There he goes. I mean, it's not... Look, Leo...
That's actually the ramp they've got set up in Calais to help the cross-channel migrants just shoot across in the rubber boats. I mean, yeah, I think he's seen Boris Johnson and thought, well, it worked for Boris Johnson. I'll have a go at that. But I'm not sure he's got the charisma or the popular appeal of Boris Johnson.
Did that zip wire thing work for him?
Yeah.
Oh, did it? I mean, we still think of it, don't we? We still talk about it.
He was Prime Minister. And,
oh, there was that. Yeah, he did all right, didn't he? What do you make of all this, Cressida? I mean, the Lib Dems... They need to grab attention while they can, right?
They do, exactly. They haven't got much airtime, so he's making the most of it. He's going, look at me with jazz hands. And he looks like he's having more fun than the other candidates, doesn't he? He's really...
Yeah.
I mean, whether he can keep it up, I don't know. It looks exhausting.
I like it. I'm not going to knock him for that. Why not? Why can't we see politicians enjoying themselves? Why can't we see more kind of like those games they used to have on Gladiators? Do you know, where they hit each other with big, giant foam?
Great idea, Andrew.
No, that's the way the election should be won.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
As far as I can see. Anyway, let's get another question now. We've got one from John. Hi, John. Hello.
Good evening. My question is a prison question.
Good. We love those. Go for it.
Can Trump be president from jail?
John, do you have any feelings about this? Because, I mean, this has been all over the news this week.
There was a very good TV series years ago called Porridge.
Oh, yes, I remember it well.
and I see this as a sort of American successor to Porridge, with Trump as the big man in an American prison.
I think it might be as entertaining. I mean, this is absolutely fascinating, Leo, because a lot of commentators on the left as well are saying that these charges, that this should have never got this far, should never have gone to court.
Yeah.
And now there's this unanimous verdict against him.
Yeah.
Is there a case to be made that this is just going to be reversed when it's appealed?
Well, yeah, and it seems to have totally backfired for the Democrats, because everybody can see that it's, they've really sort of had to stretch and overreach to try and make something that's basically an accounting error. Politicians make mistakes all the time. I mean, Diane Abbott can't even get the right shoes on her feet. So why you?
That's not illegal, though, of course.
Yeah, but why you? Well, it probably would be illegal if she was running for, to be the Republican candidate. So they've tried to, finesse this into being, a felony by saying, oh, he's trying to influence the election. But it's ridiculous. I mean, John Edwards did the exact same thing. His prosecution wasn't successful. Bill Clinton paid Paula Jones $850,000, and she was much worse looking than Stormy Daniels, which shows if anything, Trump can get value for money, and I think taxpayers want that.
I tell you what, Stormy Daniels must have been gutted with the court illustrations. She does not. She doesn't look good, Anyway, no, look, Cressida, I don't want to shame anyone in particular. But what I would say about this is that whether you come from the left or the right, whether you support Trump or don't support Trump, it does look like a massive own goal for the Democrats, because
I think so.
Most legal experts seem to think it shouldn't have got this far, that you can't just turn a misdemeanor that's beyond the statute of limitations into a felony by appealing to some federal law.
Well, yeah, and lots of judges wouldn't touch it, and eventually they found Alvin Bragg, and he was just delighted. Did you see his speech afterwards? I think
this is the district attorney, by the way, Alvin Bragg, who did campaign saying he was going to get Trump.
Yeah, that was
his thing, right?
He went in, and then in the speech afterwards, he was so pleased with himself, and I think he said without fear or favour 3 or 4 times in about 10 minutes. And I thought the lady does protest too much.
She does indeed, and it's very interesting that a lot of people have said well, no one's above the law, and that's true, no one is above the law. But as Ron DeSantis pointed out, no one is below the law either, and it does look like very much that no one else except for Donald Trump would be tried in this way on these charges.
Absolutely, and the voters can see that, and the voters don't like having the choice taken away from them. That's something that happens in dictatorships.
Yes.
So the fact that they're being denied, potentially being denied the chance to decide, maybe if the Democrats left it alone, people wouldn't vote for Trump anyway. But now that they're trying to take Trump away, people are like, wait a minute, I want some of that. And Trump had a 6-point poll boost, and he raised $39 million in 10 hours.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I'm not a Trump fan by any means, but I do think this is playing into his hands. And I'll be talking later to Bob Wiener and Seb Gorka, who will obviously be coming from very different sides on this. But I do want to understand how this is going to affect it, because what if, for instance, Donald Trump were to go to jail on the 11th of July, when the sentencing is planned? If he were to go to jail and then lose the election, how could that not be deemed election interference? How could that be deemed a legitimate election? I don't see how that could work.
I agree.
So I'm going to be putting those questions to Seb Gorka and also to Bob Wiener, and we'll see what they come up with, because I really think this is going to be a big deal. Anyway, we're going to move on now. Do we have any more questions? Oh, we've got an email in. Thanks for emailing in. Danielle, this is from Danielle. She says, was Nicki Minaj playing the race card? You're familiar with Nicki Minaj, with her work.
My idols.
Yes, you like that song, what's it called, Anaconda? That's the one you're always whistling that in the green room, aren't you?
I don't know what I'm committing myself to, but yes, Andrew, yes.
Yeah, it's a wonderful tune. Now, the thing about Nicki Minaj, she's been done for drugs in Dutchland.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what's going on?
In the land of drugs. It's like being done for chocolate at Willy Wonka's factory. It's ridiculous. I mean, she's gone from a place where cannabis is legal and she's taken cannabis to a place where cannabis is legal. It's just leave that cannabis at home and get some new cannabis when you get there.
So my understanding is, that's right, I don't understand, because she's saying it was a act of racism. It could be, couldn't it? Because they're not arresting many people for cannabis in the Netherlands, are they?
No, I mean, I don't know. It's not for me to say whether they were racist or not, but exactly as Leo said, I thought, really? Is she getting her own cannabis? I don't imagine she gets her own coffee. Never mind her...
I mean, she's a millionaire, right? I presume.
I think so.
But I'm a bit hazy on the details, but isn't it the case that in the Netherlands it actually isn't really legal? They just sort of turn a blind eye to the various shops and things?
They don't turn that much of a blind eye if you're taking it through in a suitcase at the airport. No. You know, that's always a no-no at any major transport hub. But, I mean, playing the race card, we could probably disprove this by seeing if any white people have ever been convicted of drug offences in the Netherlands.
And have they?
I think they have.
Oh, yeah. They have?
So it's illegal for white people as well.
Sorry, Nikki. You were wrong about that one. Never mind. Let's move... She doesn't watch. Let's move on now. After the break, I'm going to be speaking to author Tiffany Jenkins, who's going to be joining me to discuss the sponsorship row, which is set to have a major impact on art festivals in the UK all this summer. Please, don't go anywhere.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
What about the elections? Because it seems that the king and everything is moving because of it, and we've got a lot of royal engagements and things that happen at this time.
Yes, well, you know, it means that he has to take more time and be at home. He can't go to all the things he wants to do. He's been doing 5 a day, which is probably made Camilla a bit cross. But what they still hope is that they can get the Japanese emperor and empress over. That's in July. That they can go to France for the 80th anniversary of the fighting. And he will be able to do 1 or 2 things, and Ascot he's very keen to do. Now, those aren't things that are political in any way. I just want to talk about Harry and Charles's argument, where Harry said he didn't want to stay, he wanted to go to a hotel. And it's come out now that actually King Charles is believed that he was offered St James's, and Princess Anne stays there and Beatrice stays there.
And this was for when Harry came over for his 10th
yeah,
anniversary
exactly.
for
And the policemen are wandering around with guns, and there's no chance of actually there being any problem there. So the fact that he said that it wasn't safe for him was not actually a very sensible thing to say, I don't think.
Well, he went to Nigeria, and that is, in the world ranking, it's ranked as quite a dangerous place.
Yes, one of the dangerous places in the world. But now Harry and Meghan have been invited to go to Ghana.
Oh, God. Well, it's interesting because my parents are from Ghana. I have Ghanaian heritage, and I'm thinking she'll probably then claim there's a percentage that she's Ghanaian as well. I'll be like, hang on a minute, you were Maltese, you're also Nigerian,
and
now you're going to say you're Ghanaian
and
German.
Yeah.
Come on. Thank you very much.
Squeeze it in.
Yeah, let's get them all in. Angela Levin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The People's Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This week, it was announced that the Edinburgh International Book Festival has ended a 20-year sponsorship deal due to pressure from climate protesters. Investment company Baillie Gifford has been criticised for its investments in fossil fuels, and the chairman of the book festival said they did not think the event could be held safely in August under the threat of disruption by activists. The week before, the Hay Literary Festival dropped Baillie Gifford as sponsors over the firm's links to Israel and fossil fuel companies. So here to discuss this, I'm joined by the author and broadcaster Tiffany Jenkins. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, Tiffany, you've written about this before when there was an attempt at a boycott last year at the Edinburgh Festival, a similar kind of thing. Could you give us the background to this situation?
OK, well, in 2023, you had a bunch of people called Fossil Fuel Books. At that stage, you didn't know who they were anonymous. Get together a group of authors, including big names like Zadie Smith, Niobe Klein, to say that they would leave the book festival and unless they severed their links with Baillie Gifford, or Baillie Gifford stopped investing in fossil fuels. And then, horror of horror, Greta Thunberg pulled out. At that stage, it went a little bit quiet. Baillie Gifford made the point that actually of their portfolio, 2% goes into fossil fuels. They're a big investor in future energy, things like Tesla, electric cars. So in fact, compared to other firms, they're very progressive. They're probably the future of the solutions to climate change.
And
but
they don't make a big song and dance about all of their philanthropic.
Well, they do a ton of philanthropy that you just don't know about. They fund domestic violence shelters. They do all sorts of very, very good works. They are utterly quiet about it because it's not for virtue signalling.
But this year, it's very much the combination of Israel with the fossil fuel debate.
Well, this year, you had fossil fuel books pivoting with great principle to Gaza, which is even more tenuous for Baillie Gifford, and they've put out a statement saying they've got absolutely nothing to do with it. And I think it seems to be something to do with things like Amazon and a few other technology companies. So and in fact, if you're an author, you're heavily involved in books, obviously, which are very carbon intensive. So hypocrisy abounds, and Baillie Gifford is an extraordinarily poor target for these people. But what's interesting is how effective they've been.
Yes.
You know, they've taken down Hay, which Bill Clinton called the Woodstock of the mind. You know, they've taken down now Edinburgh after a 20-year partnership.
Yes.
Without this money, they probably won't go ahead. So why? Is it because of their coherent campaign? No. In my mind, it's the cowardice of the literary elite. Last year I tried to do an open letter to counter their open letter. And a number of big-name authors who are successful, prominent people said they couldn't put their name to something so public, even though they agreed with me.
This is interesting, isn't it? But that's more and more the case with the kind of the tribalism of our times when it comes to politics and ideology, is that people don't want to stick their head above the parapet and say even if they know something is right. But isn't this a bit worrying in terms of what happens to arts festivals generally? Because don't artists rely on the corporate sector? We may not like to admit that. We may like to think it all comes from government, state sponsorship, arts council. It's not the case, is it?
No, and ideally you want a mixed funding stream. So you want the box office, you want people paying for their tickets, you want kind of that sort of money. You do want state sponsorship. You want all the money you can get. These things are really expensive to put on, particularly to keep prices low so that everybody can come. And Baillie Gifford also sponsored the kids programme, which is, you know, free, I think. And then you do want corporate sponsorship. The reason why you want 3, if you like, is so you're not reliant on any.
Yes.
You know, there are strings attached to a lot of government funding.
Of course.
Particularly in terms of audiences and now more in terms of content.
Well,
you want freedom.
Yeah, really? I had a guest from the Arts Council here who was talking about how there was a certain degree of ideological capture within the Arts Council, which does inform some of its funding.
Very much so.
So it's important, isn't it, to have multiple streams of potential revenue. But what does this mean? I mean, a lot of this is coming from artists, from creatives, the very people that these festivals are there to support. Does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't.
Really?
I've seen it for about 20 years. It's a sort of what you've got is this. Really, since the 1970s, you've had a crisis of purpose within arts organisations and artists, and they've sort of piggybacked onto any fashionable cause to gain legitimacy.
Yes.
Social inclusion. You know, under Blair, under Labour, you had museums rebranding themselves as centres for social inclusion, community outreach, and you've had sort of less and less talk of quality criticism. the point of books, you know, to make us think. Those sort of things are things that artists and I think the literary world now find quite hard to argue for. And you see this, there was a letter now finally way too late supporting somewhat, well, no, complaining about the abandonment of funding, unable to argue for corporate sponsorship. This is the Edinburgh authors, and unable to argue for the kind of book festival as a place of plurality. You know, this is a space that doesn't have to take an ideological line, that doesn't have to be political, that can open up conversations.
But why is it
they're unable to say that?
Well, why is it that so many arts festivals are now becoming quite homogenous when it comes to politics? Because you would have thought that they were... I understand very passionate artists and creatives getting on their high horse about stuff. They've done that forever. What I don't understand is the capitulation of those in charge of these festivals. Why they can't just say, you get to have your opinion, you get to scream and shout as much as you want, but we also get to have these other artists and creatives who won't necessarily agree with you.
I think it's a crisis of purpose. You know, they are unable really to talk about books and writing and thinking and arts for its own sake. It always has to be tied to something else. For some time, it was tied to the economy.
Yes.
You know, there was this idea of the knowledge economy and the creative economy and things like that. And what that masks is that this sort of hollowness, really. This absence. And I think that's obviously terribly unfortunate. There are artists and writers and thinkers out there doing good things. There are audiences who want that. But at the moment, those at the top of the game either believe it and can't say it out loud or don't believe it at all.
And what does this do for other artists and writers? Because this is obviously coming from a lot of the big names, those who can afford not to go to a book festival, those who can afford to lose that avenue of promotion. But there's a lot of artists and authors who do depend on these things.
Well, I think for the former, actually, they do lose out. I mean, I used to find Edinburgh in particular was a way of taking the temperature.
Right.
You know, you went, and it happened at the same time as the Fringe Festival and the International Festival. So you just had these thousands of people coming from all over the world, bursting with ideas and creativity, whether they're juggling or whatever, miming or doing another version of Macbeth. Oh,
there's a lot.
But there was a lot going on, and comedy, of course.
Yes.
But what you could do is you could go to a mix of events, and you just had a sense of what people were really thinking and worrying about and talking about, and that I think has gone. So I think everybody loses out. Your big name author needs that to know how to write about the world. You know, we all need the kind of the productivity of a collision of ideas that these festivals bring.
So what happens next? Is it the case that the book festivals might change their minds by the time we get to next year, or will this just put us... Is this just setting a precedent that's going to be forevermore?
It's been like watching a slow-motion car crash. They've lost... I mean, the Edinburgh Book Festival in particular has had to move venue and to partnership with the university, so it's gone from a beautiful garden to the dead kind of lecture theatre of bureaucracy. I think these festivals are in big trouble, and they'll want more government sponsorship because they still sort of think that they are entitled to it, which means I think they'll probably become smaller, less fleet of foot and less interesting, and probably less popular.
OK, well, that's a bit of a downward note for the end, but thank you ever so much, Tiffany, for joining me. Really appreciate it. And next on Free Speech Nation, what next for former President Donald Trump after he was found guilty of falsifying business records to commit election fraud? We're going to be joined by a Republican and a Democrat to discuss this one. It's going to get heated. Don't go anywhere.
Hello and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, we've seen plenty of fine weather over the weekend. However, this week is going to be turning more unsettled and a little bit cooler. For today, though, we have had high pressure dominating the weather over the UK, but we have had this frontal system move into the northwest and a slight squeeze in those isobars too, so turning damp and rather windy. It is gradually going to be clouding over from the north through into this evening, staying clearest for longest across the south. And we will start to see some outbreaks of rain and drizzle continue to move their way into northwestern areas. So turning a little bit cooler under the clear spells in the south, but for most, a rather mild night and most places not dropping below double digits. So to start on Monday, there will be a little bit of brightness in the south, but as I say, it will gradually cloud over through the course of the morning, staying largely dry though. However, we will start to see some rain and drizzle move its way into northwestern England, northern parts of Wales, and quite a cloudy picture across Northern Ireland and northwest Scotland, still with that rain and drizzle, but brightening up through the morning across parts of Aberdeenshire, and there will be some sunny spells across the Northern Isles, but plenty of showers in between those spells of sunshine. Overall on Monday, it is going to be a rather cloudy picture, still with those spots of rain and drizzle in the northwest. By the time we reach the afternoon, it may brighten up a little bit across central and southern UK, but most of the sunshine is going to be across Scotland. However, quite a blustery day on offer there, so that will just take the edge off the temperatures a little bit. But in those sheltered spots where you catch the sunshine, it should still be feeling warm. Now, as we head into Tuesday, we are going to see a bit of a change. Further rain moving in from the northwest, quite blustery, and plenty of showers behind too. However, it will still be staying dry across the south and southeast and still feeling warm where you do catch any sunnier spells, but cooler across Scotland, particularly in that wind. And as we head into next week, fairly unsettled, largely dry in the south, but it is going to be feeling largely cool.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
Yeah, for dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Earlier this week, Donald Trump made history by becoming the first ever former US president to be criminally convicted. A New York jury this week found him guilty of falsifying business records to commit election fraud in a case which involved the cover-up of hush money payments made to buy the silence of a porn star in the days before the 2016 election. He was found guilty on all 34 counts and is due to be sentenced on the 11th of July, just before the Republican convention, which is set to formally nominate him as the party's candidate for president once again. So here to discuss this, I'm joined by Bob Weiner, Democratic strategist and former spokesperson for the Clinton and George W. Bush administrations, and Seb Gorka, former deputy assistant to President Donald Trump. Welcome both to the show. Seb, I'd like to come to you first about this. From a British perspective, a lot of people are very confused. They see this as a misdemeanor, which is beyond the statute of limitations, that has somehow been elevated into a felony. How exactly has that been achieved?
With pixie dust and a lot of hatred. Thank you, Andrew. It's been a while. Yeah, you're absolutely right. These were, if a crime had occurred, they would have been misdemeanors that would have simply been irrelevant at this point because they'd expired under the statute of limitations for New York. However, in some strange kind of incantation that no one can explain, they were connected to a business expense filing in the January after the election in 2016, and that somehow made it a magic felony, which is weird because how can you undermine an election 3 months after it occurred? So we know what this is. It's a stitch-up job. It's a hatchet job. Biden is being trounced in the polls by my former boss, so they want to steal the election before the first ballot is cast. So there's a reason that the president garnered $54 million of donations in the 24 hours after the quote-unquote conviction, because Americans see through this for what it is. It's just political hackery.
I'm going to bring Bob Weiner in there. What do you make of that analysis? I mean, it's certainly the case, isn't it, that we've had lawyers and the legal experts on the left as well really troubled by the fact that this ever made it as far as it did. Do you see this in any way helping Trump's campaign?
No, and I love the spin that Sebastian puts on it, except for the fact that 12 jurors decided 34 legal counts. I thought it might have even been the 9 that Trump signed himself, but that memo that involved everybody around Trump who always met with him was convincing as well from Weisselberg, and so his chief financial officer. So this was a documented case. It wasn't just Michael Cohen or David Pecker or Stormy Daniels. It was the paperwork. Trump signed the checks. I mean, how much more do you need? And so this is a guilty. Every newspaper in the country said that he was guilty, 34 counts. And how did it get to be a felony? Because it was tied to election rigging and the meetings. Even Hope Hicks confirmed that it was a crisis about what happened with Access Hollywood, and they didn't want more anti-woman stuff. Okay, so every newspaper in the country made it that it was tied to election rigging. It was a continuation of election rigging that he did in Georgia and trying to change the electors of people that weren't even electors, making them electors all around the country. What? This guy has decided that the law is applicable to nobody but him, and the American people are sick of it.
Bob, I just want to bring Seb in here. Now, Bob Wiener there making the case that he's clearly guilty. It's election rigging. One thing I don't understand is that Alvin Bragg, the DA, doesn't have jurisdiction for a federal crime. I mean, he can prosecute based on a state crime, but not a federal crime. And that's the way they've elevated this to a felony. So how did this happen?
Well, good for you. Good for you. And the FEC, can you stop talking when he's asking me, Bob? Just stop it. The fact is that the Federal Elections Commission, the Federal Elections
I'll come to you in 1 second. Let me just hear what Seb has to say. I will come to you in 1 second.
Leftist just can't debate, just a typical leftist. Look, the Federal Elections Commission said no crime. The feds said that. Bragg's predecessor, Cyrus Vance Jr., said no crime. Even Alvin Bragg prior said no crime. But then he was in a campaign for re-election. It's a weird thing here, I know, but we have elections for prosecutors. And this hack, who was funded by George Soros, said, I'm going to put Donald Trump behind bars. That's how independent he was. So, no, he has no jurisdiction. That's why they couldn't even explain what the crime was, which is, it's really weird. How do you have election interference 3 months after the election occurred? It is an absolute farrago. It's a nonsense. But don't worry, Trump is now stronger than he has ever been since he came down the escalators. Go to my Twitter feed, go to Seb Gorka and see all the Democrats
your Twitter feed.
with the screenshots.
Okay,
he's
let
doing
me
it.
answer on the polls, though, that aren't yours.
Bob, let me come to... Thank you, Seb. Let me just come to Bob on that point, because a lot of people are saying that this is helping Donald Trump. A lot of people have seen, for instance, that the judge in this case was a donor. It was only a small amount, but did donate to an anti-Trump campaign. And by New York rules, as you will be aware, he's meant to recuse himself. He didn't do that, did he?
There was no call for him to recuse. It was people seem to be in the spirit of blaming their wives. You know, his wife is the one who's most involved, just like Clarence Thomas's wife and Alito's wife. So, I mean, let's get over the wives here. But really, let's look at the polls, which Sebastian doesn't seem to want to care. 26% of Republicans less likely to vote for Trump, 11% of independents. Biden now in the latest polls has taken a slight lead when he was like 5 behind before this trial. People read the real news. And Andrew, the real news is that he was convicted on 34 felony counts and has tried to delay on all of his other trials. And people are wising up to it, so that a woman in my wife's church, who's the choir director today, said, it's time to pay the piper.
Seb, I want to come to you on that, because a lot of people say that, you know, obviously the Democrats now in their campaign are going to be repeating that phrase, convicted felon, and that could have an impact, particularly on those floating voters who, irrespective of what they think about the legitimacy of the trial, might just be nervous about having a convicted felon in the White House.
Andrew, I'm not debating anymore. I mean, I surrender. The choir director in Bob's church has said pay the piper. So, I mean, end of story. You know, the sword of Damocles has landed. Look, don't listen to lunatics who believe in fake news. Go and watch the footage on my Twitter feed of President Trump arriving in the New Jersey WMA, in the wrestling ring for the UFC yesterday. The biggest ovation, not for a rock star, not for a wrestler, not for an MMA fighter, but for President Trump after the conviction. Look at the footage from his campaign. I've been to a lot of rallies with the boss. We've never had a rally in the last 8 years. of 100,000 people in a Democrat state in New Jersey. In the Bronx, 30,000. And the clip I play every single day on my radio show, Andrew, the little 10-year-old black kid in Harlem, not exactly MAGA country, seeing President Trump and saying, "We love you, Trump." Then the little Hispanic girl behind him joins in. And then all the adults in Harlem say, "We love you, Trump." America has woken up, and they've had it with the decrepit, senile old man in the White House.
Let's leave the question of popularity aside, or whether this is going to help or hinder Trump when it comes to the election. But Bob, can I ask you about the kind of precedent that this sets? Because there's a very good reason, isn't there, that historically political parties haven't gone after former presidents and charged them for criminal activity. I mean, I know that Trump had the whole chant of "lock her up," but he never actually did it, did he? And once this happens, doesn't it open a kind of Pandora's box? Doesn't this open the possibility for Biden to be prosecuted? Doesn't it open the possibility for Alvin Bragg to be prosecuted for election interference?
Well, a couple things, Andrew. First of all, I never heard from Sebastian. Never heard. He didn't do it. Haven't heard from any of the Republicans, the puppets that stood around the news conferences that Trump staged. He didn't do it. He didn't do it. And never heard from Trump anything like Bill Clinton did when he had a similar thing with the women that he was involved with. And he said to his wife, to his family, to his country, "I'm sorry." The magic words, self-recognition.
What?
That's what's going to bring Trump down, is he has none of that, and that's what the polling is showing. Now, in terms of other presidents, no other president has done the kind of crimes that Trump did, and lies and cover-ups. That's why he was indicted. That's why he was convicted. No other president has done it. So when Trump said nobody else, yeah, nobody else did what you did.
But wouldn't the Democrats, Bob, wouldn't they argue that, sorry, the Republicans, wouldn't they argue that the Hillary Clinton's email wiping would classify as something that's potentially prosecutable?
She didn't say she didn't do it, first of all. And I've seen every Trump staffer using personal emails, too, by the way. And there was really no classifieds out of her emails.
Oh,
that was a very
gosh.
debatable situation. Oh, God, I know. But that was a very debatable situation, what happened to her. And by the way, the polls showed that before Comey came forward with his news conference reinvestigating and later silently saying, "Oh, no, we didn't mean it," when Comey, there was a 10-point flip. So it's in Hillary's book, and I put it in the Des Moines Register, that there was a 10-point vote switch when Comey did his news conference from before and after. And Robbie Mook, Clinton's campaign manager, said 10-point switch in the polls from what Comey did.
OK, well, let me come to Seb on that, because Bob makes a point about, you know, Trump hasn't shown remorse. This is something that is taken into account when it comes to sentencing. And on July the 11th, this might be the thing that might justify the judge going for jail time, or Alvin Bragg asking for jail time. Do you think that's likely? Because obviously he can't show remorse, can he?
No, because he's innocent. And you know, I don't know where you found this old fossil, but listen, the only thing we remember about Bill Clinton, the only phrase anyone remembers about Bill Clinton is not "I'm sorry," because he never said it. The only phrase is "I didn't have sex with that woman. I didn't have sex with that woman." That's the only thing we remember. I mean, oh, and by the way, when it comes to the emails, Comey himself in front of the world said there were 18 emails that were top secret SCI on her private server. Each one of those is a felony, and she should be in prison right now.
Sorry, finally on this, we haven't got much time, unfortunately, because I could debate this all day. It's a lot of fun. But I want to ask you first, is Trump going to serve jail time? Will the judge go that far? Seb, I'm going to come to you first on that.
Well, he is a prostitute for the left. I mean, this is a man, when I was in the courtroom sitting behind President Trump 10 days ago, he told, as the defense was about to stand up, the judge in front of us, we witnesses in the courtroom, said, "Sit down, I don't want to hear from you." This is a guy who should be wearing the jersey of the Biden DOJ. So anything is possible, but woe betide that man, because that's a dangerous move.
Same question to Bob. Do you see it as dangerous if he does serve jail time? Do you think he will?
Well, danger. You know, I went to the first day of the Bragg trials, and there were 7 Trump people and 3,000 media out in front. I mean, the violence is not going to happen. I actually agree with people who said that. I also agree with Seb, and I think we'll have an agreement here. He probably will not do jail time. The judge will probably give him probation, give him extremely strong wording, And even despite the 10 gag order violations, that judge made an exception. And you can see in the trial, you talk about the judge being unfair. The judge said during the trial, well, we have to recognize that you're a former president. He gave him that, and I didn't know where that came from, that he had to say that.
Bob.
So the judge said that during the trial. So that judge would bend over backwards to be fair, and I think that's what's going to happen here, because the judge will try to avoid violence and give Trump due deference.
Understood.
But he will do justice.
Bob, we have to go now, unfortunately, but thanks both for coming on, because it's very important to hear both sides. Thank you very much. Next up on Free Speech Nation, the University of Cambridge is set to introduce a new freedom of speech code. We're going to be joined by Bryn Harris from the Free Speech Union to discuss that. Don't go anywhere.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Well, Welsh farmer Gareth Wyn-Jones is a first-language Welsh speaker and joins us now. Gareth, I mean, a lot of people will be thinking, hang on, this guy is a Welsh teacher. He speaks English. He knew what was on the parking ticket. He's just trying to make a point. He's being a prat, isn't he?
No, hey, come on, mate. I'm a first language Welsh. It's important that we watch after our language and, you know, that everything's bilingual. For us in Wales, you wouldn't go to France and expect your ticket to be in English, would you? You know, English is the most spoken language, but let's watch after these small languages. It's part of our cultural. So, you know, I take my hat off to the guy. Fair play to him to go out and to fight this. But what it's done is put it onto the mainstream media, and you're talking about it, even that you're calling them that. You know, at least we're having a discussion about it, and it's putting the Welsh language in the forefront. And,
so,
you know,
Gareth,
Sarah Cymraeg speaking Welsh is important.
Yeah, so Gareth, this is a matter of principle. Is there a sense that the Welsh language is being eradicated in Wales? Is this something that the Welsh people need to rise up against?
Well, Welsh government are trying to, you know, bring a lot more Welsh speaking into our daily life and teach people how to speak Welsh. Well, everything should be bilingual then. And I think, you know, it should start with government. So government should be putting pressure on these companies to make sure everything is bilingual. So I get behind this guy. Fair play to him. It's a good stance, and it puts it in the public eye. Let's have everything in both languages, especially Welsh, because that's my first language. And
you know what? If I was Welsh, if I were Welsh, I think I would agree with you. I think I would agree with you, Gareth.
It depends if you come from Wrexham.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So, the University of Cambridge is set to introduce a new code designed to ensure they comply with the recent Freedom of Speech Act, which makes it a legal requirement for universities to protect free speech. Bryn Harris is Chief Legal Counsel at the Free Speech Union, and he joins me now. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrew.
Bryn, can you tell us a little bit about the background to this? Why is it necessary for the University of Cambridge to adopt a free speech code?
Yeah, certainly. So, first of all, this is a good news story. I'm not sure we get many of those about free speech, but in 2023, there was a new Act of Parliament, the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act, and it's done a number of things. Now, one of them is that it said that institutions have to have a code of practice, which they have to comply with, which says what their values are regarding free speech and how they're going to secure it at their institution. The law already did that, so it's not a huge change. The other things, though, that the Act did, which are important, it created a new regulator, or a new regulatory scheme run by Arif Ahmed. It's a very well-known advocate for free speech. and he's going to run a complaint scheme, and this is going to put a bit of pressure and allow students or academics whose free speech is infringed to take their complaint to Arif at the Office for Students.
OK, but will this do anything about the... I mean, there's a lot of preemptive no-platforming that goes on at universities. You know, there's a lot of people who say, we can't invite this person because the security costs will be too prohibitive and that kind of thing. Will this do anything to change the culture of universities? It
will, yeah. I mean, to come back to the... We'll come back to the security question, because that's very important. I think what this Act is going to do, in the best-case scenario, is it's going to create a degree of freedom for those academics who want to begin building a culture of free speech. An Act of Parliament in itself is not going to change the culture of universities, and it shouldn't, because they're autonomous institutions. But what it will do is protect those who want to start inviting contentious speakers, who want to have, want to explore difficult topics, and it will prevent universities from closing that down. So this is the sort of, the door just ajar. That's what the law has done.
So what happens, say, they want to invite, say, a gender-critical feminist, the kind of people who've been particularly targeted by student unions in recent years, and the activists say, yes, well, if you do that, we're going to kick up such a fuss, we're going to cause so much trouble that you're going to have to hire all kinds of security, and then they can't afford to do it. What about in that situation?
So the 2023 Act specifically says that universities can't shift security costs onto the organisers, because as you're hinting, it was a well-worn way of getting contentious events cancelled.
Yes.
Because they'd say, oh, these people are threatening to protest and we can't afford it. The Act says, unless the exceptional circumstances apply, the university, you have to stump up. And that sort of plugs a loophole, if I'm not mixing metaphors there. Very useful. And if we go to the Cambridge Free Speech Code, which I think is excellent, by the way, one thing they say very encouragingly is the default is that you let events go ahead. And I think this is the thing that we need to start really selling to universities, that free speech doesn't really cost much. You know, to have free speech, you hands off, let things happen. The law is only going to require you to intervene in the most exceptional circumstances, because universities, they're not really dangerous places. There isn't a great deal of criminality most of the time, So I think that's what we need to be saying to them, that look, don't think of this as a new bureaucratic burden. This is laissez-faire, hands off and let it happen.
So things are going the right way. I mean, the Free Speech Union, who you represent, have done an awful lot of incredible, important work defending people who've had their free speech violated, and universities have been particularly susceptible. So are you heartened by this? But coming from Cambridge University, of all places, which has got a pretty bad track record on this.
Yeah, exactly. Cambridge lost a Vice-Chancellor, Stephen Toop, because he was so terrible at free speech. So this is a real turnaround. I think the proof in the pudding is going to be how it's implemented. If you look at it on paper, it's very good. The question is, how is it going to be implemented? Now, there probably will be the odd niggle. I think the real thing we're going to have to look at is how universities stand by free speech when it gets difficult, when students are saying, we feel unsafe, we feel hurt. Are they going to have the stones, if I can say that, to stand up to these students and say, you may feel hurt, but I'm sorry, you've just got to tolerate it because that's free speech. And that's going to be the crunch.
Well, let's hope so. Bryn Harris, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Andy.
And there's plenty more to come on Free Speech Nation, so we'll see you again in a short while. Don't go anywhere.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, we've seen plenty of fine weather over the weekend. However, this week is going to be turning more unsettled and a little bit cooler. For today, though, we have had high pressure dominating the weather over the UK, but we have had this frontal system move into the northwest and a slight squeeze in those isobars too, so turning damp and rather windy. It is gradually going to be clouding over from the north through into this evening, staying clearest for longest across the south. And we will start to see some outbreaks of rain and drizzle continue to move their way into northwestern areas. So turning a little bit cooler under the clear spells in the south, but for most, a rather mild night and most places not dropping below double digits. So to start on Monday, there will be a little bit of brightness in the south, but as I say, will gradually cloud over through the course of the morning, staying largely dry though. However, we will start to see some rain and drizzle move its way into northwestern England, northern parts of Wales, and quite a cloudy picture across Northern Ireland and northwest Scotland, still with that rain and drizzle, but brightening up through the morning across parts of Aberdeenshire, and there will be some sunny spells across the Northern Isles, but plenty of showers in between those spells of sunshine. Overall on Monday, it is going to be a rather cloudy picture, still with those spots of rain and drizzle in the northwest. By the time we reach the afternoon, it may brighten up a little bit across central and southern UK, but most of the sunshine is going to be across Scotland. However, quite a blustery day on offer there, so that will just take the edge off the temperatures a little bit. But in those sheltered spots where you catch the sunshine, it should still be feeling warm. Now, as we head into Tuesday, we are going to see a bit of a change. Further rain moving in from the northwest, quite blustery, and plenty of showers behind too. However, it will still be staying dry across the south and southeast and still feeling warm where you do catch any sunnier spells, but cooler across Scotland, particularly in that wind. And as we head into next week, fairly unsettled, largely dry in the south, but it is going to be feeling largely cool.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've got summer sewn up with an incredible trio of treats, and you could win them. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. Fun in the sun could be on us. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
How does it work in your home then when you're discussing politics, especially with your young son, Nigel?
Well, I mean, we discuss politics rather than argue about it. Both of us are political professionals. We've been in the game a long time, so we understand that. So we're more keen on what is actually going on and how things are working out than clashing over opinions. Now, Claire is a Tory Brexiteer. I'm a Labour Remainer.
Do you think relationships like your own are going to become less and less common?
I think they are, and I think we can see that politics has become very divided, it's become very toxic, and we've lost that art of debating. I'm more than happy to speak to anybody on any subject to do with politics, because I think it's only healthy to listen to someone's opinion. You may not agree with it, you may think that they're ridiculous. However, I think it's really important that you hear those views, because if you only become encased in a bubble of your own opinion, you're never going to learn anything. And I think politics needs that. You need to be able to explore other sides of an argument. It also makes you better at arguing. Yeah. And Nigel and I constantly disagree on various bits and pieces, but you learn how to place your argument so much better because you know what the other side are thinking. Now, if we had that across the country and across the House of Commons, we could have so much better debate and so many better different opinions coming through, and it would be a lot healthier.
And polite debate, which always strikes me about you two. You disagree on most things when it comes to politics, but you do so with so much humour and so much respect for one another.
Well, we find politics fun, and so when we bring politics into the home, we want to have fun with it too.
Britain's election channel.
And there's plenty more still to come on Free Speech Nation this week, including analysis of this week's Chinese military drills. And we're going to discuss concerns that Scottish children are being allowed to self-identify their gender. But next, we're going to get some more questions from this fantastic studio audience after the news headlines with Sam Francis.
Andrew, thank you very much, and good evening to you. It's just after 8 o'clock. Let's get a roundup first of today's election news. Labour has been refusing to set out specific targets on its pledge to lower net migration if they win the general election in July. It's been at the forefront of the party's campaigning today after accusing the Conservatives of repeatedly breaking their promise to protect UK borders. Sir Keir Starmer says last year's net migration figure of 685,000 people has to come down. But his Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper told us this morning it wouldn't be wise, she said, to set a timeframe or a target figure.
Well, net migration has trebled in the last 5 years under the Conservatives. One of the biggest drivers of that has been work migration. We're not setting a specific target on it. And the reason for that is partly because the Conservatives have just effectively ripped up all the targets that they've set over many years. They've discredited the whole process. But also, more importantly, because there are short-term factors that can affect the numbers. And what we think instead is we need to have a long-term approach that is about bringing net migration down and tackling the failings in the system.
Yvette Cooper there speaking earlier to us this morning. Well, staying with Labour, Diane Abbott has confirmed that she will run as a candidate for the party in July's general election. The veteran MP says she will represent Hackney North and Stoke Newington, the seat she has held for many years, after speculation this week that she was planning to choose to stand down. She's posted on social media tonight, though, denying that she's been offered a seat in the House of Lords and said that she wouldn't accept one if she was to retire. Turning to the Conservatives, they have been focusing on the NHS today in their campaigning, promising to boost community care to help make the NHS faster, simpler and fairer. The party's pledging to expand their Pharmacy First scheme and to build 50 new diagnostic centres across the country. They say those plans would be paid for by cutting the number of NHS managers back to pre-pandemic levels. Well, Health Secretary Victoria Adkins told us that they are working to make the NHS better.
My job as Health Secretary, for example, is to explain our vision for our NHS, which is to reform it to make it faster, simpler and fairer. And some of the announcements I have today concerning GP surgeries, concerning Pharmacy First and community diagnostic centres are the ways that we will help deliver that over the coming years. We are going to fund this. It's fully funded. We're going to fund it partly through a reduction of managers in the NHS.
And finally, rounding up our news on the election campaign trail today, the Liberal Democrats have been focusing on health as well as the Conservatives, but they have attacked the government's record and they're promising to reverse £1 billion of Conservative cuts. The party leader, Ed Davey, says he would fund local services by cracking down on tax evasion. And he also accused the Conservatives of decimating public funding, saying it's left Britain with what he called a ticking time bomb of health challenges. And news from the sporting world tonight. Former England Rugby League international and motor neurone disease fundraiser Rob Burrow has died at the age of 41. One of the sport's most successful players, he was diagnosed with the condition in 2019, and his family tonight say that he will continue to inspire them all every day after he raised millions of pounds for MND. Well, online tributes have been flooding in from teammates and charities, and in the last half hour, in a personally signed message on social media, the Prince of Wales has also paid tribute to Rob, describing him as a legend who had a huge heart. Sporting star and fundraiser Rob Burrow, who has died at the age of 41. In other news, tributes have been paid to the 29 people killed in an RAF helicopter crash at a service to mark the 30th anniversary of the disaster. The Mull of Kintyre accident was controversial, with an inquiry initially blaming the pilots. Those findings, though, were later overturned, but the cause of the crash is still unknown. 16 bereaved families have now come together to form a justice campaign group searching for answers. Some space news for you now, and in a historic first, China has successfully landed a craft on the dark side of the moon. The unmanned Chang'e 6 lunar probe is exploring a region that no country has ever managed to reach and is on a mission to collect rocks and soil samples. The European Space Agency says it's a mean feat given there's no line of sight for communication, making landing there more challenging. And finally, before we hand back to Free Speech Nation, a couple who scooped £1 million in the lottery say they are both planning to continue working as police officers despite their life-changing win. Graham White and his wife Catherine are planning to buy their dream home in the countryside, along with some goats and chickens. And their wish list also includes a trip to Disneyland for their children. And if they're lucky on their best behaviour, they may even get a pet dog. Well, the couple say that finding out they'd won was life-changing.
We were just waking up to get the kids ready for school, and we were talking. Graham was checking his phone because I'm boring to talk to, and then just out of the blue said, "Shut up a minute, I think we've won the lottery." So checked it, carried on just getting the kids ready for school, and at first we miscounted and thought 100,000, and we're still jumping up and down for that, and then we sort of stopped a second and recounted, and yeah, it was crazy. Absolutely ridiculous.
That's the latest from the newsroom for now. I'll be back with another update at 9 o'clock. In the meantime, sign up to GB News Alerts. You can scan the QR code on your screen, or if you're listening on radio, go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So we've got this wonderful studio audience here. Let's get some more questions. We've got a question first from Ivan. Ivan, where are you?
Good evening. Hi.
Hello.
Is Pope Francis homophobic?
What do you think, Ivan?
I'm a gay Catholic, and but I don't think so.
No.
If it's true the word was equivalent to faggotry, and is faggotry in seminaries? I mean, it's a religion, not a nightclub, you know.
Yes, I think Ivan is entitled to say that word, being a gay Catholic. What luck that you're here. Yes, so Pope Francis has apologised, though, and I wonder about him using that word, whether it was just a kind of, it's a second language thing, potentially. Maybe the word doesn't have the same connotations.
Yeah, so he speaks Spanish, he's Argentinian, and he's in Italy. He's got the top job over there, probably got some detractors. Obviously, somebody's grassing him up. Who grasses the Pope up?
I know, that's pretty bad. Well, no, but in Catholicism, you go to confession and then it's fine.
You tell God.
Yeah.
You don't like, put it on social media. It's ridiculous.
No, that's a good point. No, Cressida, I mean, the thing is, with Pope Francis, he's seen usually as a very progressive Pope.
He is. He's the person that said, "Who am I to judge?"
Well, exactly.
Not the Pope. So, no, I don't think he is generally. It sounds like a slip-up to me.
Yeah, I mean, Ivan, do you feel that he's a judgmental Pope, or do you think he is a progressive Pope?
I think he's compassionate and merciful, and pastoral stuff is very high on his agenda. So
yeah, so we shouldn't give him too much of a hard time on this.
No, definitely not.
No, I think he's a decent chap, the Pope. OK, let's move on to another question from Roger. Hi,
Hello.
Roger. Hello.
Are we sick of the word woke and the whole woke culture?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. And I'm speaking as someone who wrote a book called Woke. But anyway, what do you think about this? Because I know what this is about, because I know Lionel Shriver has been speaking at the Hay Literary Festival, saying that we need a new word.
Yeah.
You know, what do you make?
No, a new word would be... But it's just... I think treat everybody with respect and do as you would be done by. It's just... It's all overdone, isn't it?
The problem is that every single poll that we have about the word woke shows that nobody can agree what it means. I mean, to me, it's basically a synonym for anti-liberal. Right, it's a synonym for authoritarian. You know, a lot of people who self-identify as woke say, I just want to treat people equally. I just want to be against racism, against homophobia, sexism. But that's pretty much everyone. And I don't think that's what it means, really. I think what they mean is we want to be against all these things, but we want to impose our values by authoritarian means.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting, because I thought, when I read this, no, Lionel, leave it alone. We've got a perfectly good word. Don't do the modern thing of changing what words mean. But you're saying that lots of people have different meanings anyway.
Most people don't even know what it means, I think. But
right.
yeah, but this is the problem. This is why you get when Kathy Burke, the actress, talks about how you should just be woke, and saying to the kid, just be woke, kids, just be woke. But to me, that means to want to implement really racially divisive policies, to curb free speech, to be quite anti-gay in the way that you treat people who are suffering from gender dysphoria. So, in fact, it's a kind of backward step. But I don't think she would say be woke if she thought it meant all those things.
Well, no, that's right, she wouldn't. So maybe we need not new words, but more people to read your work, Andrew.
We do. But the trouble is, Leo, what do we call it? I mean, we need a shortcut, don't we? Because we can't just say a sort of authoritarian philosophy that it has its roots in Foucauldian thought with an element of the Frankfurt School. We can't do all of that.
Or everybody's got their own definition. I'd say it's the weaponisation of victimhood or identity to gain some sort of social status or financial status.
Well, that's part of it as well, but again, that doesn't trip off the tongue.
Yeah.
Right? So you need a way to describe it.
I think in the 90s we had it perfectly. Political correctness. Because the thing about that, political correctness, everybody knows what it means, and also it's quite specific. It describes it. You're not telling you're not telling the truth. You're not being correct. You're being what's politically correct, what's socially, the accepted thing to do.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? But we'll just have to keep working with the word woke, I think, at the moment, because it's the clearest shortcut. Anyway, we're going to move on now to a question from Christopher. Do we have Christopher? Hi, Christopher.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you. On the last confrontational topic, are wealthy white men destroying the world?
Are wealthy white men destroying the world? What do you think, Christopher?
I think we all have a role to play, but maybe more so people in those positions of power.
I think rich people certainly have but the whiteness, I mean, this is actually to do with a study. This found that wealthy white men from rural areas are the UK's biggest emitters of climate heating gases because they have the bigger cars, right? I mean, I don't know what it's to do with them being white particularly.
Well,
but
I think they should have said, if they wanted to, men in rural areas. And isn't it the case that there just happens to be a lot of white blokes there?
Yeah, it's because they're kind of implying, aren't they, that being white essentially makes you emit more dangerous gases.
What a shock. It's The Guardian. I mean, when I read
was this The Guardian?
I wanted to ring my dad and say, oh, thanks for your massive carbon footprint, Dad, because it bought us shoes and our dinner and all of that stuff. Because my dad was driving, because he was the one earning the money. My mum was at home more than him, and so she had a smaller carbon footprint.
Yeah, but why does it have to be racialised? I don't think it's the case that when white people travel on planes, it emits more fumes. I don't think it doesn't work that way, does it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also, if the Guardian are really so concerned about emissions, why are they pro-immigration? When people come from, say, if you come from the Congo or Sierra Leone to the UK, your carbon footprint goes up around 150 times. So if you really care about carbon emissions, why wouldn't you want to close the borders?
But you also know that all Guardian journalists never take planes or drive cars or anything like that.
Yeah, neither do Green Party politicians. They certainly don't fly to to Brussels.
Yeah, my favourite one was when Emma Thompson flew first class from LA to attend an emergency climate protest.
To read a poem.
To read a poem. It was a pretty good poem. Anyway, let's move on to another question from Mark. Where's Mark? Hi, Mark.
G'day. I'm actually on holidays from Australia, and it's Pride Month, pretty much over here at the moment. I was just up in Birmingham, and I know in a few weeks' time it's London Pride, and I don't know. As Pride Month lost its way a little bit because
in Australia, do they have Pride Month in the same month, or is it a different month?
No, it's different months.
Which month do you have?
It's in November. Well, it depends where you are. I'm in Perth, so it depends if you're in Sydney or Perth.
I'm surprised they haven't done like a good few months now, because in Canada, I think they're doing a Pride season now, and I think eventually it'll just be this is Pride year. Pride year's coming up.
Why not?
I'm so bored of it, because it comes around every year, and suddenly every shop is sort of drenched in these really ugly flags, and all of a sudden all these
about the flags though too.
The flags are grim.
No. The original freedom flag was about everybody.
Yeah, of course. No, I don't disagree with you, Mark, because the original flag was just a rainbow flag, which is about unity. And it was saying, look, anyone's involved. It doesn't matter your skin colour, doesn't matter your sexuality, all the rest of it. But now they've added black and brown stripes to suggest racial inclusivity, as though the red stripes and the purple stripes were about skin colour somehow. And they've added trans colours. But the whole point of the rainbow is that's everyone, right? That's everyone. But also, of course, this is corporations. This is about corporations.
God, have you seen the GayNays product?
No, what's that?
Google GayNays. There's now a mayonnaise that says Gayo. I'm not kidding. I've been sent this today. Yes, it's so cynical.
Is it rainbow-coloured mayonnaise?
Well, the packaging is.
Okay.
I don't know how you'd pull that off.
Yeah, because you're not going to eat that, are you?
And you can use it as lube.
Leo Kurz. He's talking about lubricant for cars and that kind of thing.
Or sandwiches. Lubricate your sandwich.
But the corporate element to this is really, I mean, we all know every year all of the major corporations put that flag up, but they don't do it on their Middle East accounts, where it might actually make a difference because they hang gay people from cranes.
Yeah, I'm starting to think it's all about corporations making money by going along with what's popular in that area.
So cynical, Leo. But that's the point, isn't it? None of them were flying this flag back when, we didn't have equal age of consent, back when being gay was illegal, but when, they didn't do any of that when there wasn't equal marriage, all the rest of it. They do it now when it's safe. And that, I think, is what's so annoying. A lot of gay people are sick of it.
And you get like a Lockheed Martin float at a pride parade. Our rockets and missiles that are getting, dropped on refugee camps are very woke and inclusive.
We're going to kill people in an inclusive way. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just grim, isn't it? OK, and all those flags, honestly, the Progress Pride flag is the most disordered, headache-inducing thing. I just cannot stand it at all. OK, anyway, let's get another question now. Jackie.
I have a gastronomic question.
I'm glad, Jackie. We don't do enough of that on this show.
Not enough at all. Should Gordon Ramsay be putting baked beans on pizzas?
Jackie, before you go, I want to ask you about that, because there are
I'm not going, I'm staying.
No, good. But you looked poised to sit down, and I want you to articulate your view. So the baked bean on pizza thing, Gordon Ramsay's done that. Is that cultural appropriation? Because I know the Italians are annoyed about this, aren't they?
Well, if you can have salt on chocolate, I don't see why you shouldn't have baked beans on pizzas.
Well, that's very radical of you, Jackie. But I mean, and I think that's right. Yeah, because when they started putting sea salt in chocolate, I mean, that was an abomination as far as I can see.
Do you think?
Well, Steve Allen loves it. He keeps going on about it. But so Gordon Ramsay putting these baked beans, he's called it an English breakfast pizza, and it's got egg as well, and sausage, bacon, black pudding. The Italians are crying cultural appropriation on this.
Some of them are. Do you think they're all upset about this?
They are marching in the streets. Absolutely furious.
Well, maybe he should be prosecuted under the Trade Descriptions Act, then.
Because it's no longer pizza.
It's no longer English.
Jackie, you're so extreme. What do you think, Leo?
I don't think it's the worst thing British people have done to the pizza. I mean, if Italian people want something to get upset about, what about Scottish people and the deep-fried pizza? You know what I mean?
Is that not a myth, though?
No. Any chip shop in Scotland will do it for you. And
a deep-fried pizza?
A deep-fried pizza, yeah. And we put cooked chips inside it and fold it in half. And
so it's a calzone?
Yeah, it's a chip calzone. And you know what it's served with? Chips. It's insanity.
Remind me, does Scotland have a low or a high heart attack rate?
It's got a high heart attack rate, and it's not just since the vaccine came out. It's long-standing.
I mean, that is quite unbelievable. A deep-fried pizza. But the thing is, right, with the pizza, you know, when you create something like that, people should be able to do whatever they want with it. I mean, even a Hawaiian has pineapple on it. I'm sure that's not very Italian, is it?
Andrew, this is the home of free speech, and I think it's
and free pizza.
Exactly.
Yeah, we will fight for your right to eat whatever you want on your pizzas. Next up on Free Speech Nation, China has once again threatened Taiwan a week after holding military drills around the island. Fears are rising that they could be set to take more serious action against what Beijing views as simply a breakaway province. We're going to be asking two experts, how worried should we be about all of this? See you very shortly.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GBNews, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So the UK's most popular baby names have been revealed, with Noah and Olivia again topping the annual list. In at number 2 is Mohammed for boys. List is on the screen here. Number 3 for boys is George. Then it goes Olivia. Then it's Leo, Arthur, and so on. And for girls, so Olivia is number 1. Then Amelia, Isla, Ava, Lily, Ivy, Freya. There we go. Any of those names take your pick? Where's Dawn, by the way?
Well, yeah, there's on the Telegraph website, right, there's a really good way linked into this where you can actually put your name into the search engine, and these are names from 2022, by the way, and it tells you how common your name was. And I did put Dawn in, it's never been that popular. Can't think why. And there were only 5 babies named Dawn in 2022.
Really? That's surprising.
It's not a full confession here, right? My middle name, Mum, I hate you, is Maureen. Why is everyone laughing? My middle name is Maureen, which is a good old-fashioned East End name, and that has completely died out. There were no babies named Maureen.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Names like Keith, for example, Peter. Would you call a baby these days Keith or Ian? Baby Ian?
Without a doubt. I feel like I'm in a persecuted minority, you see, because later on, when I'm watching the boxing with Terry, Steve, Mick, Phil and Kev, right, and Peter, there are no such names featuring in this list. We are dying out. Our names will soon be gone forever, and I feel victimised by it.
Likewise, I should think we should start a campaign group and go on a protest march through London.
Cans, what What do you make about Mohammed being number 2 for boys' names?
You know, I'm not going to comment on people. You know, they're going to call what they want to call. What I find interesting is people that do double barrel because they can't decide, and you know,
Yeah.
a lot of people do that, and that's a bit difficult because I think you should just pick a name. You know.
I'll tell you names that are falling down the list though: Harry and Meghan.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. China warned today that anyone pursuing independence for Taiwan will be crushed to pieces and face destruction. The threat comes just a week after China conducted large-scale military drills around Taiwan in what it called punishment for so-called separatist acts. So, how worried should we be about a potential war? And would the US get involved in defence of Taiwan? We'll be shortly speaking via video link to Nigel Inkster, who is Senior Advisor for Cybersecurity and China at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. And here in the studio, I'm joined by geopolitics expert, Dr. Roger Giewolb. Welcome to the show. Roger, I want to come to you first about this. This is absolutely fascinating, but there are a lot of misunderstandings about what's going on in China and Taiwan and the tensions that are occurring there. So firstly, can I ask you about this? A lot of people perceive it to be the case that if there is an escalation, that the US is obliged to intervene. Is that correct?
No, only in the case of an unprovoked attack. If they're messing around, if they're being aggressive, if they're poking, the US, it's very woolly. They're not committed to particularly do anything. The whole China situation is kind of woolly in a strange sort of a way. It is perceived that China's the bad guy. It's a Russia-Ukraine situation, but that's not actually the case because there are really 3 factors in play here as I see. The first one is the one China policy, which says Taiwan is part of China. They belong together to the same country. Now, the US and us here accept the one China policy. And the language is also woolly, Andrew. It says we acknowledge but don't approve.
Okay.
So we have all these relationships with Taiwan and support and arms and trade and a million, but it's all under the table. It's under the radar. It's not official because they're not a state and they're not recognized.
I think a lot of people will be surprised to hear that.
So the thing that keeps it safe, I think, point number 1, is that China can take comfort that they aren't the world's bad guy. They aren't Putin. They aren't Russia invading Ukraine.
Yes.
They're claiming what everybody else says. Do you want to say it's your country? Okay, it's your country.
But a lot of people are interpreting, for instance, Xi Jinping meeting with Putin the other week as being a kind, you know, that this is a kind of new axis of evil sort of developing.
Yeah, well, they are going to become more aggressive because of the second and third factors. I think the second factor is, well, 3 factors, really. One is this new president, which I've mentioned. So, you know, he is not the one they would have liked who is in favor of unification. So they're going to show their muscle. The third factor is Joe Biden, who they perceive, surprise, surprise, as rather weak. And his recent, in the last week or so, way in which he's dealt with his support for Israel in a kind of a wishy-washy way, I think they're going to take note of and realize they can push a bit further.
Very interesting. We're going to come back to that point, I think, about the American situation. But I just want to bring in Nigel Inkster at this point. Nigel, can I ask you about these recent military drills? Of course, the last time we saw this was when Nancy Pelosi was over there in November of 2022. Is this simply a show of muscle, as Rogers says? Or is there something more sinister at play here?
It is a show of muscle. It's actually a lot of things. It is a show of muscle. It's a show of disapproval for the new president, William Lai, whose inaugural address didn't say anything new, but said some things in a way that China found particularly offensive. I think it's worth bearing in mind that between the election of Lai in January this year and now, China's military activity in the Taiwan Straits has been relatively restrained and limited up until this point. The other purposes of the exercises are deterrence, to try to convince potential actors like the United States that they can't hope to intervene effectively in the event of China deciding to invade. It's also about continuing to impose psychological pressure on Taiwan and attrition on Taiwan's armed forces, who have to send up their aging fleet of F-16 fighters every time these incursions take place. This imposes a significant toll on them. And of course, it's also part of Chinese military efforts to develop the capabilities and to exercise the capabilities that they would need if they're going to take Taiwan.
Very interesting. I just want to come back to Roger about this, because there are a number of reasons why the Chinese might want to have a presence there. There's the oil resources, of course, in the South China Seas, but there's also this question of superconductors. 70% of the world's superconductors are in Taiwan. This actually has huge ramifications if China were to seize those factories, would it not?
I was just going to come on to that, and for the benefit of our viewers and our audience, I mean, you know, why are we all sitting here talking about China and Taiwan? It's miles away. It's two countries. It's not us. We got enough of our troubles here. Well, the reason why is chips and superconductors, because if those fell into the wrong hands or were used in the wrong way, that would be the end of the world commerce, the internet, everything we do, the automotive industries, everything would fall apart. That's why it's so strategic, and that's why we're talking about it.
A lot of people don't know about this at all, and of course these chips are used in all sorts of devices. Absolutely everything.
Everything would fall apart, and that's another reason that China needs to be cautious, because it would hit them as well.
And what would happen in that eventuality? A Chinese invasion, would it be the case that Taiwan would destroy those factories, the US might destroy those factories? What would happen?
They could be shut down, they could be damaged, they could be voluntarily shut by the Taiwanese, they could be taken over by the Chinese, who up the price that the economics of everything gets crazy. Anything could happen.
Nigel, I want to ask you about this, because there are, of course, a lot of rumours that Xi Jinping is saying that by 2027, Taiwan will be within the remit of China. Do you think that is likely? And do you think we should be interpreting the recent military activity as a gesture towards that eventuality?
It's almost certainly true that Xi Jinping has made this requirement, put this requirement on the PLA to be ready by 2027. But capability is one thing and intention is another. Yeah. And I think at the moment, Xi Jinping is looking at the situation in Taiwan and thinking that actually time is on his side and things are to some degree going his way. Okay, William Lai of the DPP was elected president in the January elections, but in the legislative yuan, we've seen a majority by Taiwan's two main opposition parties, the Kuomintang and the Taiwan People's Party. And in the last week, these two parties have got together and introduced a series of new draft laws in the legislative yuan, which, if enacted, would seriously restrict the DPP's ability to govern and would enable the opposition, for example, to have much greater oversight and say in things like military budgets. And the Kuomintang in particular has been very critical of Taiwan's efforts to develop a new modern submarine fleet, which would be one of the most effective things they could do to deter a PLA attack. So I think Xi Jinping is looking at all of these things and thinking, okay, well, the situation is not that bad. And maybe by continuing a process of attrition, carrot and stick, but mainly stick, we might still be able to pull this off peacefully. I think personally he's overestimating his ability to do that. But for the moment, I think that is the dominant concern. I mean, it's certainly the case that Xi does not want a full-blown war involving the United States and its allies. I mean, the United States, as our other speaker has mentioned, maintained a strategy of strategic ambiguity in relation to Taiwan, not saying it would or would not intervene in the event of an attack. But Biden has in the last year 4 times said that the US would, so I think we have to take that. And the other thing is, in reference to the semiconductor issue, if China were to take Taiwan and take control of those foundries, nobody would have to do anything. They're dependent on a massive, complex global supply chain of inputs, chemicals, lenses, et cetera, almost all of which come from Western countries. Any interruption in that supply chain and those foundries would simply cease to function.
Very interesting. Roger, I want to come to you finally on this issue of America. Nigel mentioned the way in which Biden is sending mixed messages here. Now, Biden, of course, as you've alluded to, is trying to appease different factions of his voter base when it comes to Israel. But there's also now this trial of Donald Trump, or the conviction of Donald Trump. Does this make America look weak? And is that why Xi Jinping is reacting the way he does?
Well, that's the last point. I mean, Biden's mistake, or Joe Obama Biden, as I call him, his mistake is that he's treating Hamas and Israel the same. I mean, the head of a democratic country and the head of a terrorist organization. And he's now he's trying to force the hand of both. Hamas and Iran, their masters, couldn't care less what Biden thinks or America thinks. And he's going to put the Israelis under pressure to the point where they're going to say, well, you know, we don't care what you think either. So I think this peace plan, which he claims is Israel's, but they claim is his, has not been very well thought out.
But how does that impact on the Chinese perception?
Because, as I said earlier, the Chinese will look at that and say, this guy is a weakling. In the same way as Hamas saw that Israel was riven in two by the political faction and thought that's a good time to go and attack. The fourth point, which you just mentioned, is Trump. And I think that's another factor. If Trump is given a jail sentence, he will not be able to pardon himself because these are state crimes, not federal. Only the governor of New York can pardon him. And so he can serve as president in jail under the Constitution.
Yes.
He can indeed. So the same people who've set up all these witch hunt trials for him are now introducing into Congress that a president in jail may not have Secret Service protection.
It's incredible to think that this is happening.
That's the latest thing today. No Secret Service protection for you. You know, treat him like Harry.
Unbelievable. Well, look, this is fascinating stuff. I hope you'll come back on the show.
Sure.
Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Roger Gewolb and Nigel Inkster as well.
Thank you.
And next on Free Speech Nation, a new investigation has found that over 95% of schools in Scotland allow children to self-identify their gender. We're going to be joined by Susan Smith, Director of For Women Scotland, the organisation who carried out the investigation. That's coming up next. Don't go anywhere.
Hello and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, we've seen plenty of fine weather over the weekend. However, this week is going to be turning more unsettled and a little bit cooler. For today, though, we have had high pressure dominating the weather over the UK, but we have had this frontal system move into the northwest and a slight squeeze in those isobars too, so turning damp and rather windy. It is gradually going to be clouding over from the north through into this evening, staying clearest for longest across the south. And we will start to see some outbreaks of rain and drizzle continue to move their way into northwestern areas. So turning a little bit cooler under the clear spells in the south, but for most, a rather mild night and most places not dropping below double digits. So to start on Monday, there will be a little bit of brightness in the south, but as I say, we'll gradually cloud over through the course of the morning, staying largely dry though. However, we will start to see some rain and drizzle move its way into northwestern England, northern parts of Wales, and quite a cloudy picture across Northern Ireland and northwest Scotland, still with that rain and drizzle, but brightening up through the morning across parts of Aberdeenshire, and there will be some sunny spells across the Northern Isles, but plenty of showers in between those spells of sunshine. Overall on Monday, it is going to be a rather cloudy picture, still with those spots of rain and drizzle in the northwest. By the time we reach the afternoon, it may brighten up a little bit across central and southern UK, but most of the sunshine is going to be across Scotland. However, quite a blustery day on offer there, so that will just take the edge off the temperatures a little bit. But in those sheltered spots where you catch the sunshine, it should still be feeling warm. Now, as we head into Tuesday, we are going to see a bit of a change. Further rain moving in from the northwest, quite blustery, and plenty of showers behind too. However, it will still be staying dry across the south and southeast and still feeling warm where you do catch any sunnier spells, but cooler across Scotland, particularly in that wind. And as we head into next week, fairly unsettled, largely dry in the south, but it is going to be feeling largely cool.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
Yeah, for dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, whoever wins the election is going to have to deal with the elephant in the room, immigration. Ignore the public's concerns about unsustainable numbers at your peril. And in My Take at 10, this is Nigel Farage's moment of destiny. He's got 4 days to decide. He must take the plunge. Plus my top pundits and tomorrow's papers. We're live at 9.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. A new investigation has found that more than 95% of secondary schools in Scotland are allowing children to self-identify their gender. The organisation For Women Scotland authored the report, which warns that biological males can participate in female-only sports classes and enter female toilets and changing rooms because of the self-ID policy. Using Freedom of Information requests, For Women Scotland discovered that 9 in 10 Scottish secondary schools taught pupils that people have a gender identity that could be different to their biological sex. So joining me now is one of the directors of For Women Scotland, Susan Smith. Welcome to the show, Susan. This is very troubling. A lot of people have said that all of this kind of stuff is a bit of a myth, that it's just the product of the imagination of culture warriors. But your Freedom of Information requests show that the teaching of gender identity, a highly contested theory, as fact, is endemic in Scottish schools. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's exactly right. And it was based on FOIs that were done in England, and the results in England were substantially lower. But it doesn't really surprise us, because for a long time we have had some completely dreadful guidance in Scottish schools that's come from the Scottish government that we don't believe is legal. And we also have some very, very determined government-funded lobby groups who are also in schools and who are also giving schools advice which is not legal. So it's not a surprise, but parents should be really worried, because children are actually being put at risk because there are so many safeguarding failures here and there are so many legal failures here.
Now, to put this into perspective for English viewers, you know, a lot of people here will think of the way that Stonewall has influence in various corporations, for instance, or public bodies. In Scotland, you've got LGBT Youth Scotland, which is paid an awful lot of money to go into schools, and a lot of schools will outsource the teaching of sex education to those people. Is that the problem, or is it even, does it go higher than that?
That's a very big part of the problem. And as you say, LGBT youth get a lot of money. They get about £1 million a year from the government and local authorities and the NHS. And then they go into schools and charge the schools for them to deliver this training. They're training up teachers as well. We think they've trained about 5,000 teachers in about 200 schools. 90% of teachers have had training from LGBT Youth Scotland. They don't have any expertise in these areas, and they are an activist group. And one of the things they came out with recently, for example, after the Cass report, was released, they said they disagreed on puberty blockers and that they believed there was huge benefits in what they call gender affirming medicine. So they're actually on a completely different track to what people are now starting to realise is best practice when dealing with gender confused children. But they are not being questioned within the schools, and they need to be out. But you're right, it does go higher because we do have this transgender guidance for schools, and that was actually originally written by LGBT Youth Scotland. The Scottish Government had to review it because ministers found that it was not legal. But they've made some pretty basic changes to it. They've even got a little disclaimer in that guidance saying that schools have to take independent legal advice. So they know that it's open to challenge, and we believe that a school could face a pretty serious harassment charge at some point in the future. And it's the school and the local authority, not the Scottish Government, who'd be at fault. But schools don't know this. They have no idea that they are being fed this nonsense.
Well, can I ask you, Susan, because you mentioned the Cass review there, and I know that Dr. Hilary Cass did appear at Holyrood and was questioned about this. Why is it not the case that the Scottish Government has surely they have changed their mind about this on the basis of this expert study that took over 4 years to put together? I mean, even in London, Wes Streeting for the Labour Party has said they're going to implement the findings of the Cass review. Aren't the SNP going to follow suit and therefore presumably rewrite that guidance for schools?
Well, the Scottish Parliament did, you're right, they voted to endorse the Cass report, and in theory, yes, they should be pulling this straight away. They're not, and it's very difficult, of course, once something's in, and it may have to take a legal challenge to get it out, but it runs completely contrary to Cass. And what is terrifying, what is really, really terrifying with these FOIs that we found are that parents are being positioned as the enemy. Only 4% of schools said that they would tell parents if a child decided they were changing their gender. And a lot of the excuses and rationale given for this has come from this transgender guidance for schools and from LGBT youth and so on. And it makes out that parents are potentially dangerous. So children are being taught material and parents have no oversight of it, and they should be very worried.
So that's a real problem. But one of the other things that you were talking about in your report is regarding the idea of male students using female facilities, toilets, participating or changing rooms, and then participating in sports for girls. How common is that in Scottish schools?
Well, we've got very conservative numbers, actually, in the report, because there were some schools where we had incomplete information. But what we found was that 60% of schools were operating mixed toilet facilities, and 55% have mixed changing facilities. And about the same amount, 54%, allow for mixed-sex sports. There are very few that are actually preserving single-sex. So it's, I think it's 3% for sports, and it's something like 13 and 19% for toilets and changing rooms. So girls have been put in a terrible position because we know that girls' participation in sports is quite low anyway, and that girls often drop out due to worries about body image and feeling inadequate. And if you put them in a mixed sex group to play sport, all of that gets compounded. So girls' health is seriously at risk, as well as, frankly, their physical safety and the likelihood of suffering some kind of harassment.
So finally, Susan, now that you've conducted these Freedom of Information requests, now that you've exposed the extent of the problem, do you think something will actually be done about it?
Oh gosh, I would like to think so, but we've been at this for a very long time, and you know we've come up with a lot of this information. Ultimately, I think these things do start to crumble. We've seen quite a lot of that especially within some of the single-sex rape crisis and domestic violence services. But it takes quite a while on pulling on these threads, and then something just dreadful happens and everyone says, gosh, what a terrible surprise, and we didn't see that coming. But it's really about time people sat up when they are warned and pay attention, because these things will unravel. But I'm worried that when they unravel, there will be a lot of very damaged young people as part of that damage.
Absolutely. Well, Susan Smith, thanks ever so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it. And next on Free Speech Nation, a suspended driver joins his court hearing while being behind a wheel. A contestant on The Chase spectacularly butchers his answer. And Angela Rayner gives TikTok a special behind-the-scenes look at the Labour battle bus. Yes, it's almost time for social sensations. You won't want to miss that. See you in a few minutes.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Angela, it's been a busy old time for the Royals.
It has been a very busy old time. I thought I would start with Prince William. He was doing the third of the 3 garden parties that were going on, and it was pouring with rain. For the King Charles, it was beautifully sunny. This was pouring with rain, and you think it would be very sad he's not with his wife. I thought he did a brilliant job because he got all his cousins together. They all dressed up absolutely beautifully, and they were very keen to be friendly and chatting. They even were chatting round to everyone. It doesn't mean they're going to have an important place within the royal family when he takes over, but it was just very nice. And Zara, I thought, looked stunningly beautiful with a pink hat, white dress with pink buttons on. She looked absolutely lovely. And she and Beatrice looked absolutely gorgeous, and I thought that these two are very happily married and they're blossoming and they look wonderful. So it was very nice, it was very good, and it saved him from looking to be all alone.
He hides it really well, and he does his role nicely. Now, what about the awful trolling that Catherine's been receiving?
Yes, 9 million women have cancer a year. Nearly all of them carry on going to work, but she doesn't. You know, she's taking advantage of her position. Well, he doesn't know how ill she is. She doesn't know what sort of medication she's having. I thought it was so spiteful. And actually, what was worth seeing this terrible painting in Tatler that made her, you know, look nothing like her. And it was a bit like a sort of spinster headmistress.
Wouldn't that have been a nice... That picture was meant to be a nice picture of her.
It was absolutely terrible. It looked nothing like her. You know, it's not a time when you want to see a picture and think, oh, my goodness, is this what people look nice?
The People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. It's time for Social Sensations. That's the part of the show where we look at what's been going viral this week on social media. And first up, we've got this video of a suspended driver in the US who turned up via Zoom to his court hearing on the road. Let's have a look.
Mr. Harris, are you driving?
Actually, I'm pulling into my doctor's office, actually.
This is a driving while license suspended?
That is correct, Your Honor.
And he was just driving. He didn't have a license.
I mean, he seems so surprised. I mean, I think it's bad enough sort of zooming into a court hearing a bit late. I mean, he actually says in the full video that I'm just pulling over now, I'll be with you in a second.
Yeah.
And the judge says, look, I don't know why you've done this, but I'm going to have to sentence you now.
Yeah. I mean, the evidence is right there.
But he's probably just not very smart, right?
Yeah.
But the judge couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
It just absolutely couldn't. I mean, what else can you say?
I don't know what you can say. Good effort. I'm always impressed by people that are a bit more outrageous. So good.
But I don't think he was trying to be outrageous. I just think it didn't cross his mind.
And also, on a lot of Zoom calls, I'm not wearing any trousers.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
That's him going to get out of the car like that.
Yeah, I wish you wouldn't stand up when you do that. Anyway, we're going to move on now to this. This is a video from ITV's game show The Chase, when contestants had the chance to get one over on the chaser, Jenny Ryan.
Confectionery company makes Revels.
Cadbury?
Stop the clock, Daddy's wrong, take your time.
Mars? She said Cadbury. My Mars? Message.
Cadbury. She said Cadbury. Mars. It's exactly what Fiona said.
OK, so that's not... I mean, that's ridiculous. She said the right answer. The chaser had already said the wrong answer. He just vetoed her.
Do we all know what the chaser is?
Well, that's the problem, is that if you don't know the rules, this probably won't make much sense.
Right. No, I can't say I've ever seen it.
Oh, OK,
I'm aware of Bradley Walsh.
Well, I mean, the point...
So the chaser got the answer wrong, so then the players get to have a go at getting it right. But they said the same answer as what
Brilliant.
the chaser said.
OK, that's
and
very
it's funny.
So, again, it's just another video with a very stupid person.
Yeah.
That seems to be the theme tonight. Anyway, let's get another one. This is the Labour Party, who have shared a behind-the-scenes look at their new battle bus on TikTok.
Come on, guys, we're going on the bus. This is where all the action happens. And then I have a fridge. How did this get here? We have a little secret area in the back, so we have a little secret area.
I mean, I like the funky music.
Yeah, and also I like the fact that Angela Rayner has that bus recorded as a business expense. They don't pay tax on it. It's I don't know. You can't call that a battle bus. I saw this guy built a killdozer. He spent years putting armour plating on this bulldozer, and then drove it across town, and eventually was shot dead by the police. That's a battle bus.
Yeah.
This is just a bus.
Yeah, I think battle bus is what you get in Mad Max, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a very dull episode of The Crib.
Yeah. Yeah. So you don't know Nicki Minaj, but you do watch The Crib.
Popular culture, and
No, I know you don't. Let's move on now, because this is the part of the show where we talk through your unfiltered dilemmas. We've got a dilemma from Kirsty. Kirsty said, I wrote in a few weeks ago to ask for advice when the guy I was speaking to kept sending lengthy voice notes. We've now been on a couple of dates, and at the end of date 2, he proposed. Is this all going too fast, or is he just an old-school romantic? You know, those very long voice notes, I always think they're a bit of a red flag.
Absolutely. I can't believe we told her to get rid of him the first time she wrote in, and now I can just hear, it's not good.
What? So, OK, so it's too late.
Well, I should be the authority on this, because I'm successfully married. And I proposed to my wife seriously on about date number 5 or something. It was very early on, but I could tell straight away. So yeah, I mean, it depends. If the dates...
Did you do that so that she didn't have time to get to know you properly?
yeah. And now she's trapped.
Now she's trapped.
Now she's trapped. I got her pregnant, got that locked in.
That's a great. That's great advice from Leo. Let's move on now to a second dilemma from Harry. Harry says, I think it's important to dress smartly for work, even at weekends, but my colleagues have other ideas, and sadly one of them is my boss. How have we let standards slip so badly? Leo, you always dress smartly, so this doesn't really apply to you, but what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, relatively smartly compared to what I normally wear.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it is. I think the most important thing is wearing nice shoes.
Oh, yeah.
If you wear nice shoes, you can wear anything, and it looks like it just elevates what you're wearing. It looks like you're wearing shabby chic instead of just, shabby.
Oh, yeah, if you wear really posh shoes, people think, well, the rest of it must be expensive.
Yeah.
OK, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Or, as in the Shawshank Redemption, he says, well, how often do people look at your shoes? So maybe that's not the best advice. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure about this posh shoes.
No?
Imagine that, shiny brogues and a tracksuit. That's just very nice shoes.
But you always make an effort, don't you, Cressida, in terms of dressing for work?
I'm glad you think so, Andrew. Good. Yes, I make an effort. Do you know what started us all off was Lewis Schaefer wearing suits.
Oh, really? Yeah.
He's responsible for dress standards at GB News.
I thought you were saying he invented the suit.
He would like to think so. I'm sure he would probably tell people that he does. Anyway, we've got to move on. Thanks so much for joining us for Free Speech Nation this week. This was the week, of course, when Donald Trump was convicted in court, the Pope was in trouble for homophobia, and it was revealed that gender ideology is rife in Scottish schools. Thanks ever so much to my panel, Cressida Wetton and Leo Kearse, and to all of my brilliant guests this evening. And if you want to join us live here in the studio in London and be part of the audience, dead easy. Just go to www.sroaudiences.com. You can apply there. Stay tuned for Mark Dolan tonight. That's coming up next. Don't forget, Headliners is on every night at 11 o'clock. That's the late night paper preview show where comedians talk you through the next day's top news stories. Thanks ever so much for watching Free Speech Nation. I'll see you next week.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, we've seen plenty of fine weather over the weekend. However, this week is going to be turning more unsettled and a little bit cooler. For today, though, we have had high pressure dominating the weather over the UK, but we have had this frontal system move into the northwest and a slight squeeze in those isobars too, so turning damp and rather windy. It is gradually going to be clouding over from the north through into this evening, staying clearest for longest across the south. And we will start to see some outbreaks of rain and drizzle continue to move their way into northwestern areas. So turning a little bit cooler under the clear spells in the south, but for most, a rather mild night and most places not dropping below double digits. So to start on Monday, there will be a little bit of brightness in the south, but as I say, it will gradually cloud over through the course of the morning, staying largely dry though. However, we will start to see some rain and drizzle move its way into northwestern England, northern parts of Wales, and quite a cloudy picture across Northern Ireland and northwest Scotland, still with that rain and drizzle, but brightening up through the morning across parts of Aberdeenshire, and there will be some sunny spells across the Northern Isles, but plenty of showers in between those spells of sunshine. Overall on Monday, it is going to be a rather cloudy picture, still with those spots of rain and drizzle in the northwest. By the time we reach the afternoon, it may brighten up a little bit across central and southern UK, but most of the sunshine is going to be across Scotland. However, quite a blustery day on offer there, so that will just take the edge off the temperatures a little bit. But in those sheltered spots where you catch the sunshine, it should still be feeling warm. Now, as we head into Tuesday, we are going to see a bit of a change. Further rain moving in from the northwest, quite blustery, and plenty of showers behind too. However, it will still be staying dry across the south and southeast and still feeling warm where you do catch any sunnier spells, but cooler across Scotland, particularly in that wind. And as we head into next week, fairly unsettled, largely dry in the south, but it is going to be feeling largely cool.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the Great British Summer Giveaway, and have we got a prize for you? There's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go. How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online. In the United Kingdom and across the world, this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my big opinion, this election, the elephant in the room is immigration. My message to the entire political establishment, all of the candidates, ignore the public's concerns at your peril. In the big story, would a shift to the right save the Tories? Former Government Minister Edwina Currie and the director of the Popular Conservatives movement will do battle. It might take a 10 as speculation grows that he may run for a seat. Nigel Farage has 5 days to decide. The clock is ticking. I'll be giving my verdict at 10. Two hours of big opinion, big debate and big entertainment. My big opinion is next, and it's about the importance of immigration in